Hey, I'm Connor Klein, the Language Czar, and welcome back to another Tip Thursday where I'm going to be giving you a very basic tip with respect to what type of suitcase you should consider bringing on your next travel adventure. So what should you consider when you're thinking about going on your next trip in terms of a suitcase, or maybe you're actually thinking of purchasing a new one? What are the considerations you should have in mind? Now for me, the first thing to start with is the size. Yeah, that sounds very self-explanatory, but I'm thinking more in terms of when you have to get on an airplane, of course. And we all know that there are hand luggage restrictions, so you have to basically go for as big a size that you can get on. Of course, all those dimensions are regulated by the airlines themselves, so that can change between airline and airline. Now, I'm a guy who travels with a lot of stuff. I'm not a light packer. That's in part because I have this vlog, this YouTube channel, so I need to travel with my camera equipment. So I always need to check in luggage when I'm going to take an airplane. It's not possible for me normally to travel just carrying on. The things I look for in a suitcase are the following. The first thing I look at is what material is it made of? Is it going to be light? Because that's essential. Now you got to think there's also going to be a weight restriction on that check-in luggage, after which you're gonna have to pay an excess weight charge, and they can run into a lot of money. They can very quickly be 15 euros maybe, or that's like over $15 US per kilo. So you gotta make sure that when you get the suitcase to start off with, when it's empty, that it weighs as little as possible. That way you can fit as much stuff in without being over that weight restriction. That all sounds pretty obvious, but weigh the actual suitcase before you leave so that you see if you're actually over the weight limit before you get there. Sometimes I even go over to a check-in desk that's actually free, and if the weighing scale is already turned on, then I will weigh it and then, you know, start taking stuff in and out and move it to my carry-on if necessary to make sure that I'm, you know, right on that weight restriction, whatever it is. Now, the next thing to consider is not just the weight and the material it's made of, but in terms of, is it hard? I recommend a hard case. It just keeps everything more protected. I mean, if you have the soft fabric as the cover, then there's always a risk that it gets torn, it gets damaged, the stuff inside, your belongings in the suitcase, they also get damaged when you're traveling. Who wants that? Don't risk it. Hard case, always better. The third thing I'm going to give you as a tip and to consider when you are purchasing or going to packing your suitcase next and selecting that suitcase is, does it have wheels? I mean, that sounds again pretty basic, but of course you can have a backpack, which traditionally you just like throw over on your back, and it doesn't have wheels at all. It's just for one that I guess makes a lot of sense if you're going to go up into the mountains or somewhere where there's no flat surface. Then that would be a very practical bag to be bringing. But otherwise you should have 4 wheels, not 2, 4 wheels, and make sure that they swivel. That is going to give you the maximum amount of ability to turn the suitcase with the minimum amount of energy being exerted when you're traveling. Of course, the downside to that, if there are cobblestones, it's a pain pulling that suitcase along them because the surface is not flat enough. Of course, if you have to go off terrain, or maybe there's just somewhere where you have to keep lifting it and carrying it because it's not flat, something like grass, then it's gonna be harder to move. But if you're one of those people who's saying, but Connor, I just love the idea of having a backpack. It's more this kind of image of being the adventurer, the traveler with my, you know, backpack on my back, all my belongings, my house there. No, that's not a good idea. You're kind of living in that cliched image because, especially in the summer where it's hot, you might be on public transport and you're gonna carry all the weight on your back. It's gonna get really uncomfortable in my experience. I actually did that when I first started traveling. I used to have a backpack, and I remember being in Italy, for example, on public transport. There's no air conditioning. It's 35 degrees Celsius outside, and you've got 20 kgs on your back when it could be just on the ground beside you, and then not really take much energy or not making it perspire as much. So I would say backpacks, forget them unless you're actually gonna go off terrain, like go up into the mountains or somewhere where it's really, there's no flat surface, then it makes sense to me. Então, essa é Virginia, é a menina que repara sempre a minha mala aqui. Então, bom trabalho, muito obrigado. Nós vemos depois do verão, né?